To give batters a different look, pitchers throw a changeup.
Your idea of a different look is sunglasses.
That's true. But La Quinta Inns and Suites is really taking the different look thing to a new level.
Definitely a major league makeover, starting with a bolder, brighter lobby full of comfortable spaces to let you settle in.
Or chill out in front of a big flat screen like Wingo would.
Oh, you know it. It's a changing La Quinta look to help you get in the zone and look sharp when you hit that big meeting.
Prepare to win at business with La Quinta Inns and Suites.
Book now at LQ.com.
This is the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast.
Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN2. You guys can call us and hang out, 860-506-5505 to leave a voicemail, 860-506-5505. If it's any good, we might play it. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. All of our phone guests on the show, Penzo, Performance Line, and Sarah. We're going to go straight to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Jason Fitz, Sarah Spain in for the guys. There is a lot of controversy, it feels like, around the U.S. Open this year. It feels like every time I turn around, there's something dramatic going on.
Yeah, things get a little too hot and people get a little crazy, right? I think a lot of them are heat break related, and some of them are just Nick Kyrgios related, and he's his own ball of fire. This guy, Nick Kyrgios, man, I have been frustrated by him for quite some time. This is a guy who obviously very talented, but has been disciplined in the past for not trying his hardest, has admitted in the past he doesn't always give his best, and has major attitude problems. So he's midway through a match and playing poorly, looking lackadaisical, seeming to be not giving his best effort, and the chair umpire comes over and gives him a pep talk and later says, oh, it's about the upholding of best effort rules. He wanted to check in and give him a warning, sort of. You're not doing your best. It's clear you're not doing your best. It's going to be a problem. But instead, it comes across more like, hey, man, you're really great for the game of tennis. I'd like to see you do your best out here. I want you to do well. And you're like, this isn't your job.
Yeah, the thought that the chair ump actually gets out of his chair, comes down, sort of kneels down, and when you watch the replay of it, it really does feel like a Pop Warner coach sitting down with the quarterback. It's like, hey, man,
listen, son,
you can
I know
do
you're
better
having a
than
bad
this.
day.
I know you're warm right now, and it felt awkward for me to see that sort of support without any acknowledgement to his opponent about what's going on in the moment. Now, the U.S. Open came out and issued a statement essentially saying he was checking on him for health reasons and making sure he wasn't overheating. It just doesn't jive
Biggest
with what
eye
anybody
roll
saw.
ever.
Yeah, well, and Roger Federer was not pleased with it either.
It's not the umpire's role to go down from the chair, but I get what he was trying to do. He behaves the way he behaves, and then you, as an umpire, take the decision on the chair. Do you like it or don't you like it? But you don't go and speak like that. In my opinion, I don't know what he said. I don't care what he said, but it was not just about how you're feeling. I'm not feeling so well, and go back up to the chair. It was there for too long. So it's a conversation, and conversations can change your mindset. It can be a physio, it can be a doctor, it can be an umpire for that matter. So that's why it won't happen again. I think everybody knows that.
And it wasn't just the length. It was, we heard the words that he said, which were, this isn't you. I want to help you. I want you to do well. And he went on to win the match to the point where Andy Murray was on Nick Kyrgios' Instagram. Nick Kyrgios posted the shot of him with his, hand to his ear, like, what else you got? Give me the booze. I went on to win. And Andy Murray wrote, when are you going to announce Mohamed Layani as your new coach? That's the umpire's name. So he's just taking a little dag.
Do you think it makes a difference? By the way, Federer is going to play Kyrgios in the third round, so he's going to get the chance to sort of avenge this however he sees fit for the game. But do you think that the chair ump coming in and talking to you changes your mindset? Because it feels to me like it could. It feels like it can absolutely focus you.
Absolutely. And listen, Nick Kyrgios is a kind of weird guy, right? We don't really know what motivates him, because if you're the kind of person that becomes a professional tennis player and then can play in tournaments for not only your money but your pride and everything else, and admit that you don't always give your best, who knows what keeps him motivated? Who knows why a chair umpire saying something might change his mind? But Roger Federer is 100% right. Any moment like that can change the direction of a match, and it clearly did in this case. So it also seems odd to me, a guy who's been so disrespectful to the game. I don't know why the chair umpire would be at all invested in his success.
That's sort of another surprising piece to me, because you're talking about somebody, as you mentioned, that has been fined for not giving a great effort. I didn't even realize that was something you could be fined. Like, I can't imagine.
Well, think about tanking and gambling and betting. When it's it's an individual sport, it's pretty easy to try to throw things. So you have to make sure it looks like you're giving your best.
When I read it, I was like, oh, okay, that does make sense. But to have somebody that has been fined have somebody that's already been punished for a lack of effort, and then have the chair ump decide that that's the guy. Like, I would think even if you're going to say, hey, I want to invest in you and help you do your best so you're proud of what you did, to me, that's what you might do with an effort guy, where you come down and say, hey, you're usually...
Well, you shouldn't do that with anybody is the point.
Right.
So if this really was about either worried about his health, didn't think he looked right because of the heat or anything else, or worried about the rules of giving your best effort, then the response is not, I want you to do well, I'm here for you, this isn't you. It's, hey man, if I don't think that you're giving your best effort going forward, it's going to be an issue. Well, with a stern voice, like a chair ump, not like a coach.
And I would think that somebody that has been penalized for that in the past should not get the benefit of the doubt that it is a heat issue right there.
100%.
Like, there's a moment where, hey, I've seen this from you before, I'm just going to penalize you. I would have less problem with that. And the heat has been such a conversation throughout the U.S. Open as a group, and we obviously saw a controversy around one of the women changing her outfit and being penalized. Mm-hmm. And we've heard all sorts of controversy around guys going into breaks and sitting in ice baths.
Right. Well, Andy Murray, again, on Instagram, he's out of the tournament, so I guess he's got free time to be dabbling on social media and throwing shade. But he was playing Fernando Verdasco, and during their heat break, Verdasco went to take a cold shower, and Murray came out and spotted him talking to his coach. And that's not allowed. And it seems like pretty easy for us all to say, yeah, of course, no brainer to give them heat breaks when the weather's the way it is. You have to do that. But that means everybody needs to know the rules and follow the rules. And so Murray was back there having to tell guys and alerting officials to the incident. And he told the umpire, I had to tell him because no one knows the effing rules. And that shouldn't be the way it is, where so then he goes out and says all this about Verdasco talking to his coach. And Verdasco says, obviously, if Andy says that, I don't want to say that he lies, but I didn't talk one word with my coach or any member of my team. And so then Murray posted on Instagram, I'm off to get a health check as apparently I've started imagining things. Hashtag liar, liar, pants on fire.
Well, and I understand the players need a heat break. Why would the coaches even be allowed in the vicinity? I mean, this is simple. If it's a player getting a heat break, lock everything down and only allow the two players. I mean, don't let anybody else go into the locker room. That's a simple fix. And another example of sports in general, not thinking 3 steps down the road. I mean, you have to look at these things and say, hey, let's use a little common sense. We know athletes are always looking for an edge. Let's look at how this could turn into any edge for them and eliminate that edge. Not letting anybody else in the locker room is a pretty easy way to make sure that your integrity is never corrupted.
Yeah. Carefully regulated ice baths, I think, are the answer.
Carefully regulated ice baths. That sounds like my Friday night. That's Straight Talk
that
Wireless.
Makes no sense.
Nationwide coverage on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks.
Like that.
Well, I mean, you can't have a non-regulated ice bath, and then things just get all willy-nilly.
I don't know what you guys do around here in Connecticut. I got things to do in Chicago. I'm not limited to non-regulated ice baths.
Oh, my God.
Golic
and Wingo.
and Wingo.
Mm-hmm. Trey Wingo and Mike Golic Sr.
It's Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Presented by Progressive Insurance. All of our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Jason Fitz and Sarah Spain hanging out for Trey and Mike. You can usually hear Sarah and I hanging out from 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday on Spain and Fitz.
Gratuitous self-promotion.
Yeah, that's right. We get that for Spain and Fitz also. Did I mention Spain and Fitz is on 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday on ESPN Radio?
I just pulled a Gojo and I didn't turn my mic on.
Gratuitous self-promotion.
You didn't turn your mic on and nobody noticed? Oh, you got away with
Well,
one?
when I'm working from my home studio, there is no on-off button for my mic. It's just on. I don't have a choice. So I forget that I have to turn it on here, but I am a radio professional.
Well, that is, you're not just a radio professional. You are an all-around ESPN, professional. I was going to, bad.
5-tool player.
You are
triple threat.
Well, and that rears its fantastic head on Sunday morning because you have something cool coming up on Sunday.
Gratuitous self-promotion.
Yep, here it comes. I can't tell you anything about the story because it's so amazing. And this is a real true thing. It's been a really hard one to promote because we can't promote it because we're afraid people will start digging and spoil it. So all I can tell you is on Sunday, 9 a.m. is the debut of the E60 I've been working on for months. It's an amazing, incredible, unbelievable story that if it was in a movie, you'd be like, oh, come on, there's no way. That's what you're going to think as you're watching it.
Is this your first D60?
Yes.
That is, so congratulations. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Like, that's really, really
It's
cool.
an awesome story. I do not feel in any way like I have to worry that I'm overhyping it. That's how good it is. So 9 a.m. Eastern Sunday morning.
Gratuitous self-promotion.
That is what we're just going to keep doing that
Yes.
all morning. That's awesome. I cannot wait to watch it. It will be spectacular, as all the work that you do is. So we'll get into some of the stories now from the morning of what's trending. The Yankees lost 8-7 to the Tigers last night. You combine that with the Red Sox win, they're now 8.5 biggins back in the AL East. But they still had an interesting night because of this amazing moment.
The 3-1. Swung on, there it goes to right. It is high, it is far, it is gone. Number 300. A Stantonian home run. Giancarlo no se puede palo. He drills a 2-run home run to right, and the Yankees take a 2-1 lead.
John Sterling from WFAN on the call. Congrats to Giancarlo Stanton.
Hablas español?
For his 300.
What did he say?
I have no idea.
No say something, Paul.
No, yeah. Well, congrats.
Just my last name. I don't know how to say it.
Giancarlo been waiting 10 games to get this moment. He gets this moment. He gets his 300th. Really incredible. And it's one of those career milestones that I'm glad he gets to take it in and appreciate what it's worth to him.
Yeah, and I loved what he said after the game because it is so true. You play as many games as these guys do, and you have as many milestones. And in baseball, the numbers matter so much, right? So it does matter when you get that 300th. And so when he's hitting it and he's rounding the bases and he's thinking to himself, this one matters. This is the one that when they do my farewell, they're going to be showing this. So that's a cool thing in the moment in baseball that you don't usually get. I mean, on a basketball court, sure, you might get a timeout right after or some sort of break in action where you can sort of wave at the fans and acknowledge that you've just passed a milestone. But you get that home run trot, you really get to milk those milestones.
Yeah, and I do want to give Stanton a little credit here because we forget sometimes, in the national narrative especially, Aaron Judge has missed a lot of time at this point, and they have relied on the legs of Stanton night in and night out. Like they've relied on him every single day during this break, which has been
Too bad he can't pitch.
Well, yeah, that is
coming for
one
the close,
factor.
blow the win. Let's just talk about Stanton instead.
But Stanton's doing everything he can in his power to individually will the Yankees to continue to help them. So it's really been spectacular to see him rise up and get this moment, especially given the fact that they haven't had Judge for the last month. And on that note, the Yankees also had a big night last night because they agreed to a trade with the Giants for former MVP Andrew McCutchen, according to Buster Olney last night. So McCutchen's going to come in and hopefully, in theory, help some of that with the fact that Stanton has played so much in so many consecutive games. Maybe he can get a night of rest at this process. I'm
torn on this one because the Yankees, of course, the evil empire, they just have too much money, too much ability to get whoever they want. And I love Andrew McCutchen. He's one of my favorite players. So I want him to be somewhere where he can succeed, but I don't want him to be in Yankees pinstripes.
Well, and it's interesting for McCutchen because he gets moved again. So this is a couple of moves in a short amount of time, but this is definitely one of those opportunities where they're going to bring him in somewhere where right now he can bridge the gap. At some point when Aaron Judge comes back, it will give them another in the bevy of riches. And if they are in a situation where they're in a one-game wild card playoff, that will... Oh, we're getting bumped again with this. I mean, this is what happens.
Yes, they run a tight ship.
Yeah, well, only to me. They're scared. They're scared to tell Sarah when she has to stop, not me. God. Some guy tees off from the 10th hole at 8:51 this morning from the Dell Technologies Championship in Norton, Mass. I guess his name's Tiger Woods. I don't know. Some of you have heard of him.
Yeah, he seems all right.
Yeah. It's going to be back-to-back weeks for the fifth time this season, which I love this line. Okay, so this is what they say. No big deal for PGA Tour golfers who do it all the time, but a bit tricky for someone who's undergone 4 back surgeries since March 2014. We can't have our cake and eat it here. This has been my whole issue with the Tiger thing. We want to excuse anything about why this is remarkable and why this is great. And if he doesn't get quite the result, it's like, well, look at where he's coming to. Okay, that's fine. Then let's all chill out and agree that it's a process and he's not all the way there yet. I mean, we're just so desperate to anoint him as back and Tiger right now that we're speaking out of both sides of our mouth in any way possible to apologize for whatever the result may be.
Yeah, you're lucky that Trey isn't here because he'd bring out his Tiger binder And he would start throwing stats at you left and right about here's proof that he's back, et cetera, and so forth. I for a long time was pushing back on the Tigers' back. Now I could think it's safe to say he's been in contention. He's shown us enough that it is sort of inevitable to me that he's going to win very soon. I don't know if it's this one because, like you mentioned, as much as I don't think it's an excuse, I think it's just reality. You've got enough spinal fusions and you're playing this much golf back to back to back, whereas before he was taking long stretches in between because he wasn't able to finish rounds or he was struggling. Maybe this isn't the one. Maybe it needs to be a tournament that comes after a bit more of a break.
For the most part, and I know there's been some amazing Tiger moments, and I agree, we all want Tiger back. What I'm bummed for, and this is constantly the hill I die on with golf, there are a lot of young U.S. golfers that are worth watching, and we're not talking about any of them because all we talk about is Tiger because he's what drives ratings. I understand all that. I understand Trey's binder as well, and there's no doubting that Tiger is a brand that matters. But it feels like every single tournament there's been a conversation about one piece of his play that needs improvement, whether it's a short game, whether it's a putting.
It's the drives.
He's had struggles at different times. So I'm not willing to come back and say he's going to win because there are still intermittent parts of his game that for some reason fall apart each time.
But if he can win despite that, which we've seen him almost do it, then is that even more impressive?
Yes, absolutely. If he wins something at this point, then I'll be the first to stand up and say, oh,
I look forward to that.
Great googly moogly.
But you'll be dead on your hill, so you won't be able to stand.
That's fair. Got it in before the end of the bomb. Listen, look what they're doing to us. An arbitrator is sending Colin Kaepernick's grievance with the NFL to trial, denying the league's request to throw out the QB's claims that owners conspired to keep him out of the league because of his protests of social injustice. So they are going to go forward into a trial. That's what we know now.
Yeah, this is a big loss for the NFL. They were hoping that this would be nipped in the bud before it could even really start. And obviously, Kaepernick will be allowed to continue to press on with this. I hope I'm not getting this stat wrong because I didn't prepare for it. It just popped into my head. But I think we were just talking on Around the Horn the other day between the breaks that Kaepernick's top 5 in the history of the NFL in touchdown to interception ratio. So you look at some of the stats of what he did do when he was competing, and I'm curious as to how anyone can still try to fall back on he just wasn't good enough to get a job, especially when we were pulling dudes out of insurance offices who hadn't played in 4 years to come in and be backups. It's an unfortunate story that we're still talking about. But if this guy is willing to put aside everything he worked for his whole life in order to prove a point, and social issues matter to him more than just taking a job and acquiescing and falling in line, then I think we have to respect that.
The most damaging part of this to me isn't even necessarily the collusion part. I mean, we forget sometimes until the E60 or 30 for 30 on Donald Trump that they were sued as a monopoly and lost and for $1, and it wasn't a big deal. Like, it feels like those things fade. The most damaging part of this is that by going to trial, we're going to find out legitimate answers. I think that's got to be the NFL's biggest concern. We talk so much about how they like to keep as much as possible guarded in vaults, essentially, of secrecy, so we don't know the dirty little secrets of how the owners do business. There is a point here, if it goes to trial, when it goes to trial at this point, that we're going to find out exactly what correspondence there was, owner to owner, exactly what correspondence there was, GM to GM. And then there will be undeniable answers one way or the other about what all of this looks like and what was done and what happened, because so much speculation goes on now. And I don't even have to look at social media to know that we're already getting blown up by a guy that says, hey, we don't know that he wanted a backup job. You're right. We don't. We don't know that he didn't want a backup job. We're going to find out. I mean, that's what the trial is going to be about. We're going to find out exactly what Colin Kaepernick wanted or was asking for. We're also going to find out exactly what teams were willing to give and what teams were talking to each other about it behind closed doors to affect his future one way or the other.
And we're certainly also going to figure out whether there's hard and fast proof that they're willing to go with, because we've seen some stuff that seems pretty obvious when you've got guys that are like, well, we saw him a couple years ago. He had his shot. That's not how football works.
Right.
That's not how, if you wanted a guy and a couple of years ago you offered him a deal and he didn't take it, that doesn't mean that you've used up your one opportunity to interact and possibly sign someone. So we've seen a lot of very creative excuses. The question is whether those will be seen as hard and fast proof of something or anecdotal in ways that you can't use in a court of law for this.
Well, Ryan Smith, our NFL legal analyst, chimed in on what all this means, and this is what he said.
Today's ruling keeps Colin Kaepernick in the legal game as far as his collusion case is concerned. What the NFL wanted was essentially a summary judgment for this arbitrator to throw out this case believing on the NFL side that there was nothing to this case of collusion. But the arbitrator declined to do that, which sends the informal signal in some ways that there might be something to Colin Kaepernick's theory that collusion occurred. So now comes the main event, the arbitration. Colin Kaepernick gets to continue to get discovery, documents. He's going to try to secure evidence proving his case that he believes that collusion occurred. And at the arbitration, in a trial-type setting, you could see owners, league officials being called to testify about what Colin Kaepernick believes happened here. That two or more teams or teams and the league got together to try to keep him out of the NFL.
I think that's the part that I'm referencing that I think is going to be the most, that's the part the NFL is the most concerned about.
Discovery, yeah.
I mean, just the fact is, in today's world where trials happen and information comes out, we are going to get actual answers. And then you're going to have to face realities for every fan base about how your ownership handled it, about what communication happened from which team. It's really going to force everybody to look at it. And again, we don't know yet. So we don't know what that discovery is going to show. But we'll at least, the one thing I do love about it going to trial is that we will at least get answers. I mean, we will at least get hard instead of what I feel like we've spent 2 years speculating about who's doing what.
A lot of moving goalposts too. When it started out, well, if he's not signed by X, then maybe I'll believe something. Then we get to well, I'm looking at his numbers and maybe, well, he probably didn't want this much money. We've been moving things along. I think you're right with the discovery. We're probably going to get more actual truths. It's kind of in the same way that when someone chose to tape the owners meeting with some of the players about various issues and revealed some of the comments that were said during that. There was a lot of stuff that people would not have owned up to if there wasn't a tape of it.
100%. And that's where we're going to be through this process. That's why I like it. And I know that sounds crazy because I know everybody's dug in and they're tired of hearing about Cap. I just want to be able to look back at this era in 5 years, whatever's decided out of the trial process, and say, hey, we got legit answers on what really went down, and now we know who to hold accountable or who not to hold accountable and how all of it happened. It's Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio, ESPN News. We're presented by Progressive's Home Insurance. Get your quote at Progressive.com today. Sarah Spain, Jason Fitz in for Trey and Mike. College football is back. Gambling is legal. Want to know who or what to bet on this weekend? Here's Stanford Steve and the Bear.
Best bets of the week.
It's Stanford Steve alongside the Bear, Chris Felico. Week 1 of the college football scene is finally here, Bear. What's your biggest bet this week?
I like UNLV as a 26.5-point underdog against USC. The Trojans got a big conference game next week at Stanford. I think this is all about getting JT Daniels some experience. They got a lot of injuries to worry about. It's get up, win the game, and move on the safest way possible. You look on UNLV, Mountain West Rookie of the Year last year, quarterback Armani Rogers is a dual-threat guy. I think he'll be able to have some success offensively. Under Tony Sanchez, the Rebels have been greater than a 21-point underdog 7 times. They've covered 6 of them, including at Michigan, at UCLA, and at Ohio State. I like the Rebels to cover the big number against the Trojans.
I'm going to go with the over the total in the Alabama and Louisville game at 60.5. I think Bobby Petrino, with a whole offseason to get ready for a Nick Saban defense that has to return 6 defensive guys in the secondary. Jawan Pass is returning quarterback. He's been there 3 years. He's gotten experience behind Lamar Jackson. And also the best part of this, you get the Alabama offense with Tua, Jalen Hurts, whoever it is. Whole receiving corps is back. The running backs, offensive line. I expect Alabama to score 45 plus. Louisville will give you a couple touchdowns. We'll get that over total. Over 60.5. So that's my pick. Anything else for you, buddy?
Hey, if you want to look at the same situation, there's another game, South Carolina hosting Coastal Carolina. The Gamecocks have a game against Georgia the next week. I think this could be another similar situation where South Carolina just does enough to win. 3 games under Will Muschamp that the Gamecocks have been a 20-point favorite. They failed to cover all 3 of them, and those games came before either Clemson or an SEC rival. Same situation. Might want to look at Coastal Carolina plus 29.5.
Very good. The Bear on the look-ahead spot.
Download and subscribe to Stanford Steve and the Bear on the ESPN app and Apple Podcasts. New episodes every Wednesday.
Sarah, that's such a peek into what so much of the season is going to be. I mean, gambling has already been such a big conversation anyway in the culture of football in general, sports in general, but this year with the legalization, I think it becomes something even more people are going to be sort of dipping their toe in. You are a new Michigan fan, and the Golics are Notre Dame fans.
Not going to bet on them for a little bit just in case.
But
I know that much already.
So, there is an interesting question happening in that game in particular. And look, Michigan Notre Dame, I think, is the game that's getting all the hype. I do want to say Washington Auburn, I think is the most substantial game of the weekend. But the Michigan Notre Dame game has a lot of eyeballs because of the programs, because of the hype, and also because of the pressure. So we talked earlier about Jim Harbaugh and whether or not he's under pressure. Jesse Palmer, ESPN college football analyst, answered the question of which of the coaches in that matchup is under more pressure.
I think it's Jim Harbaugh entering year 4. I think it's finally time for him now to live up some lofty expectations. You think back to after he led Stanford to their first 11-win season in school history. After he led the San Francisco 49ers to a Super Bowl appearance, he was rewarded with a 7-year, $52 million contract to do 3 things. Beat Ohio State, win Big Ten championships, and go to the college football playoff. After 3 years now, Jim Harbaugh's 28-11 at Michigan, hasn't won a Big Ten title, 0-3 against Ohio State. This year, though, he finally has a complete team. They've played great defense. They've been able to run the ball. He finally has his quarterback, an Ole Miss transfer, Shea Patterson. Even if they lose to Notre Dame, there's plenty of season left. They can still reach the playoff, but he went 5-4 last year in conference play. It's time for him to make a statement.
And the Harbaugh thing with the quarterback, again, 3 years at Michigan, still looking for that quarterback. What makes you think Patterson's the guy?
He's the best quarterback Jim Harbaugh has coached at Michigan. He is such a natural passer and thrower of the football.
Which I agree with. Shea Patterson is a gifted quarterback. It is interesting, though, when you think about it. I think Notre Dame fans are a little surprised to hear that because Notre Dame and Brian Kelly particularly have high expectations. And the one thing that we have to remember is that Notre Dame as a brand isn't in a conference, right? So they can go into the playoff just by being great, right? Michigan is playing in the toughest conference in college football, the toughest division in college football this year. I think that there's more pressure on Brian Kelly this year.
I completely agree. I'm surprised actually by that, and I guess you can look at some of the best moments from Kelly's career at Notre Dame, and maybe those are the reason that Palmer's letting him skate a little bit more. Obviously, that 12-1 2012 season where they lost in the BCS national championship game. Obviously, last year and 2015, both 10-win years. But he's been there for 8 seasons, and they were 4-8 in 2016. You've got Harbaugh. He's only had 3 seasons under his belt. If he had just gone in reverse and started out with an 8-win year and then had back-to-back 10-win seasons, I think would make a difference. I also think you're right. His record against good teams, Ohio State for sure, Michigan State usually pretty good as well. That's going to always stand out to people. That's what's going to be the deciding factor on whether he's a success or not. There isn't really that same measuring stick for Notre Dame and Brian Kelly. I think 8 seasons where it's been pretty up and down, to me feels a little bit more of a disappointment than Harbaugh, whose main job in arriving there was just to bring some prestige back to the name, to bring some excitement back to the program. Like I said, they had one 10-plus win season in the 8 years before he got there, back-to-back 10 wins when he got there. They had one back-to-back 10-win chunk, and it was way back in 02-03 with Lloyd Carson. You're looking at a program that he needed to first get everybody back excited about, and then start having his recruiting classes, his stamp on the program start to pay off and pull forward. So I'm surprised by that, but I do understand that this is a huge name coming out of the NFL back to his alma mater at a place where people expect a lot.
I still think there has to be a little perspective. Same thing I always say to Steelers fans. Mike Tomlin can be a great coach. Ben Roethlisberger can be a great quarterback, and you can be stuck in the same era as Brady and Belichick, and you just don't get the Super Bowls you want. You can be a good football team and still be looking at it and saying, you know what, we're stuck in an era right now where the Big Ten is so stinking good and their division is so stinking good, it makes it much more difficult. Coming up, during the steroid era, there was a lot of asterisk talk when it came to the Hall of Fame. Well, asterisk talk has now invaded basketball for a much different reason.
Golic.
I tell you what, a great sports night last night, no doubt about it.
And Wingo.
What a day, what a show, what a time.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Support for the Golic and Wingo Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Let's talk about buying homes for a minute. Because of rising interest rates, there's a lot of unpredictability when it comes to buying a home these days. It's causing a whole lot of anxiety with folks. Well, our friends at Quicken Loans are doing something about it. They're calling it the power buying process, and here's how it works. Quicken Loans will verify your income, assets, and credit in less than 24 hours to give you a verified approval. This gives you the strength of a cash buyer. Then once you're verified, you qualify for their all-new exclusive Rate Shield approval. First, they lock your rate for up to 90 days while you shop. Now here's the best part. If rates go up, your rate stays the same. But if rates go down, your rate also drops. You win either way. It's the kind of thinking you'd expect from America's largest mortgage lender. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Golic. Rate Shield approval only valid on certain 30-year purchase transactions. Additional conditions or exclusions may apply. Based on Quicken Loans data in comparison to public data record. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
When it comes to hiring, you don't have time to waste. You need help getting to your short list of qualified candidates fast. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes, set up screener questions, then zero in on qualified candidates using an intuitive online dashboard. And when you need to hire fast, accelerate your results with sponsored jobs. New users can try for free at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms, conditions, and quality standards apply.
It's Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio and ESPN News, presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Shout out to my buddy Ryan Hurd. That's his new single, To a T. Drops today out of Nashville.
Gratuitous friend promotion.
Yeah, does that count? We're gonna count that.
Gratuitous self-promotion.
There you go, Ryan. Go check it out. Get it wherever you get your music from. It's out streaming today. Single drops today. To a T. Ryan Hurd, who did appear on the music podcast with me that launched yesterday.
Gratuitous self-promotion.
Woo! God, it feels good to have that button, Sarah. Sarah Spain, Jason Fitz in for Trey and Mike. And look, the longer I can self-promote, the less time we have to spend talking about Walt Clyde Frazier.
Oh, boy.
Who yesterday was on Sirius XM's NBA radio talking about the it will never die topic around the NBA and the Warriors. Check this out.
Durant, I mean, as great a player he is, I would still hold back because, man, he joined a team that really didn't need him. You know what I mean? I mean, he's right there with LeBron. Probably will surpass LeBron as the best player in the game soon. But for him doing that, I still don't give him the full credit that he probably would have deserved if he stayed with OKC and won a title with that team.
Yeah, Eddie and I have a difficult time. Like, can you place him, like, even as talented as he is, like top 10, top 15 player when the career is over? If, like you said, you can't give him full credit for the title, is it hard for you to do that?
Yeah, he's going to be down the list for me because of that, because there will be a asterisk by his name.
And look,
first of all, let me just start by saying he said asterisk worse than you, because you said asterisk. I think he said asterisk, like an ostrich.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Shea Patterson.
Asterisk.
Asterisk.
There's a lot of S's in there. You got to hit them all.
Well, that is an asterisk. Now it's in my head. I'm never going to get it. Walt Frazier won the NBA Finals 2 times, 1970 and 1973. So when he picks up his cell phone, if the old guy on the lawn has a cell phone to even pick up, if he picks it up to yell at Kevin Durant can pick it up with his very weighted hand, as he's only going to continue to add championship rings to it. And guess what? The more rings he has, the clunkier it is to try and actually press answer on Frazier's call, because guess what? Durant doesn't care.
Okay, well, let's not disrespect Walt Frazier. We can disrespect his take.
Let's get off my lawn guy.
Yeah, but you know what? There's a lot of dudes that are not of the appropriate age or even legacy to be get off my lawn dudes, and they're making the same argument. Our boy Stu Gatz is one of them, right? In his own personal record book, Kevin Durant doesn't have any titles. If you want to discuss the changing power dynamic, I guess is the best way to put it, in the NBA, then let's have a real interesting discussion about it. Let's not fall back on the same tired BS of he's not as good of a player because of this. You are watching one of the greatest players of all time. This is the same argument that people used to say about LeBron. Stop complaining and start enjoying, because when he's gone, you're going to say, why did we waste our time arguing about whether or not he should have gone? We had the same exact argument about LeBron when he went to Miami. And now we're over it because we've replaced it with a different one. To me, this is up there. And tell me if I'm missing any. With the most annoying sports debates of all time. Okay. I am so sick of hearing about Kevin Durant is a cupcake and he shouldn't have gone there. Try to beat them then. You have the exact same opportunity. And this is a team that was built mostly off of the draft. So you're going to criticize a team who drafted incredibly well, who has a bunch of unselfish players that are willing to make concessions both on the court and in their wallets in order to continue the success that they've had. Anybody else could go do it. Draft well. Find a reason to get guys to want to come. Look at the Rockets, for example. I got away from my point, but I'm going to get back to it in a minute. The Rockets probably have gotten worse since last year. They took them to 7 games without a Chris Paul injury. Who knows? I still think the Warriors would have won, but they were the closest. They had pushed them the hardest, and they lost a couple players that they really could have used, and they're picking up a guy in Carmelo that's a big question mark. If you are so mad at the Warriors, then why don't you ask other teams like the Rockets, why aren't you able to keep guys around like Mbah Moute that you need defensively? Why aren't you able to have guys buy in and say, this is a good program that I want to be a part of as it continues to try to beat on the best team in the NBA? Instead, everyone's just complaining because their team doesn't get the stars.
Yeah, it's not like every NBA team doesn't have the opportunity to draft well and create a culture, because that's what Golden State has done at this point. So, you want to go out there and complain about it. That's the piece of it I don't understand, especially because there is, and I think we're going to see a lot of it next year. Next year's free agency class is particularly
Half
huge.
the NBA.
Right. So we're going to see a lot of this next year. We're going to find out what teams, players think have created a culture, because they're going to be able to band together all over the place. So, if you're a Sixers fan, are you really going to sit there and say, well, we've drafted well, but we're not going to take any big free agents that want to come help us. We're going to do it. We're going to trust the process the whole way. No.
Well, you don't get criticized unless you win, right? We've seen so many iterations of the quote-unquote super team of guys coming together, usually a little bit too far past their prime, and saying, let's put ourselves all in one spot and win a title. They don't win, so no one complains. It's because Golden State has had such success. Let me get back to my point, which was, this is one of the most annoying sports debates ever. I'm so sick of hearing about it. It is up there with, is golf a sport? Which is so annoying.
That's a good one. Yeah.
GOAT debates across different regimes, rules.
They're fantastic.
Generations.
What is there to debate? They're petty.
Yeah, greatest of all time.
Oh, that
debates.
GOAT. Yeah.
When the rules are different, the competition's different, everything's different. College team X could beat pro team Y. Oh, throw Alabama out there against the, whatever. It's so annoying. It wouldn't happen. Fixing baseball.
Oh, that's good.
Which this show in its many iterations has had a big hand in. And then maybe I'm throwing in what makes a dynasty. Because it's just semantics.
You're missing one big one for me, and that's my conference is better than your conference in college football.
Right, that's also annoying.
That one, yeah, I'm way up there on the don't care. That's the grown-up equivalent of my dad can beat up your dad. There's really no way to prove it. Nobody has any.
I'm also not a huge fan of the Mount Rushmores, but I understand their purpose.
Yeah,
I'm looking at a history of a city or a team.
Did you include MJ versus LeBron?
Yeah, that's the GOAT debates across different.
That's just all goats. Okay.
Yes, all goats.
All goats
in all sports.
I'm also like, did Belichick make Brady or Brady make Belichick? That's one I'm tired of too.
Oh well, I mean, this is kind of like the GOAT debate, but could the '85 Bears defense stop the 2016 Patriot? Whatever.
For the love of
that
all
stuff.
Things
Also, you're never gonna know. And I realize we got 4 hours to kill. Sometimes there's not a lot of sports news, but those are the ones that when they come up, and this is the same for me with Clyde Frazier. It's just another person saying the thing we've been hearing ever since he went there. And to me, suck it up and go win. Find your own version of that.
And it's just, in all fairness, as much as I critique him as get off my lawn guy, we have to understand that industry changes. Doesn't matter what industry you're talking about, it changes. So it doesn't matter if you talk to a sports talk guy from the early 80s and they talk about what sports talk is now, they're going to be yelling about the digital world and now, now anybody could just, and in the music world, it's like, well, now, all of a sudden it used to
streaming and whatever else.
Yeah. And so like it progresses. It changes.
Well,
as
and I think
it evolves.
And the reason that matters too is if you look at guys from previous generations, they might say, we liked it when you stayed on one team and you tried to beat other guys. Well, that was what the standard was because of the power dynamic. LeBron James had the biggest hand in giving some more agency and voice to players in terms of changing free agency in the NBA. That's why we enjoy. You can complain all you want about Kevin Durant, but guess what? The reason we have NBA stories all off season long, the reason why there's incitement every single year is because guys are moving in ways that never used to happen. They did not have the ability to make their contracts so that they could decide where they want to go. You stuck around because you didn't really have a choice. I mean, Michael Jordan, even the greatest player of all time eventually got forced out of Chicago. He didn't have the power. That's different now. So these older guys might be frustrated by it, but they don't know how they would react if they were playing now.
And I don't understand why the older guys aren't looking at the young generation and saying, man, I was part of building something that has grown to this, where players have empowerment. They can go where they want. They make a ton of money. They have the ability
but you know what? That's like you saying, oh, I'm so glad I was a part of the band Perry, and then now they have whatever, top 10 singles, and they start making millions and millions of dollars, and you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm so glad I helped them get there. You'd be like, wait, I wish I was doing it now when I had the money
But
and the stuff.
But if I pioneered something, I think 20 years later I'd look at it and say, man, I was one of the people that helped. And that is, when you talk about Walt Clyde Frazier, you're talking about one of the pioneers. Like, I would look at that and say, that's a brand I helped build, and I want guys to profit off of
He needs more money for his suits, though.
Oh, that is fair.
Probably just think about that money he missed out on.
Delightful. Coming up, it's Spain and Fitz in for Golic and Wingo, and we're taking over. So we'll do one of our favorite features next. It's called Not Necessarily Sports Tinder.
Golic and Wingo.
It was all sort of one big giant Jell-O mold.
It's very interesting where that went. You up?
You up.
You mean like a booty call text? Is that what you're talking about here? Is that where you're going?
I mean, I'm just...
You up?
Yes.
Wow. I'm going to try that right now to my wife. Okay. I just sent it. We'll see what I get back. I may have to leave the show. You know what I'm saying? I got a response.
What'd she say?
She just texted back, idiot. That means I'm staying here?
Okay, that means she's not here for it. That's the next vernacular
Not
of it.
here for it?
Yeah, she's not here for it.
So if you weren't here for it, would you want to make it a point of texting back to say, yeah, I'm up, but you ain't getting this booty, you know what I'm talking about?
Still maybe my least proud moment in the history of Golic and Wingo. Sports Center brought to you by Valspar Stain. Hey, just a reminder, if doing your deck is on your to-do list this summer, put new Valspar Stain on your shopping list. That way you can get all-weather protection and more inspiring color. Valspar Exterior Stain, only at Lowe's. It's Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Your tweets through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. Jason Fitz, Sarah Spain in for the guys. And Sarah, we usually are on, weeknights, 6 to 9 p.m. On Monday through Friday on ESPN Radio.
Gratuitous self-promotion.
Where you can check us out. And on Fridays, we have a bit of a tradition, right? We like to sort of help everybody get set for the weekend.
Well, yeah, because on Friday nights, we are airing either around, 6 o'clock on the West Coast when people are leaving their jobs, they're getting ready for a big Friday night, or nearing 9 on the East Coast when people are probably getting their drink on, getting ready to head out. So we figure if you don't already have a significant other that you can hit the town with or someone to Netflix and chill with, you might be swiping left, swiping right, swiping up, and getting some Tinder action on. So we just incorporate that into our show. And it's Friday, and it's not quite 8 a.m., so it's a little early.
It's a holiday weekend. Maybe people are starting
5 o'clock
early.
somewhere.
All right, so let's do a little Not Necessarily Sports Tinder.
All right, so this is how this works.
Tinder.
That's right. The big voice guy says that. And then we find some topics that are either sports or maybe not. And we say whether we agree, we swipe right. We disagree, we swipe left. If we really agree, we swipe up, and it's called a super like. So the first one is, according to the social media accounts of some Husker players, the front of Nebraska's helmets will feature the player's home area code. At the outset of training camp, new head coach Scott Frost told reporters he'd consider continuing the tradition he started at Central Florida. So, Fitz, would you want your area code on a helmet?
I'm going to
swipe up. Super like.
I'm all about that. Like, people have so much pride in home, right? And so I think about Nashville, where I've spent 20 years. 615 has become a brand, the area code of Nashville, of T-shirts and hats, and people put it on everything. It sort of signifies where you're from. So I love, and it's Nebraska's opportunity to remind the country that they're recruiting nationally. And you might see another area code if you're watching the game and say, oh my gosh, he's from here, and then you want to go to Nebraska. I think it's great.
I'm going to
swipe up.
On
super
both
like.
The Wicked Game from Chris Isaac that's playing, and also this topic. I'm swiping up on both. Yeah, I completely agree. Also because there is this feeling of continuity from high school to college where you want to remind people that these kids came from somewhere. When you get to the pros, it's a job. When you're in college, in theory, it's supposed to be amateur, and it's supposed to be continuing the same feeling of high school sports, this feeling of camaraderie and bringing in that hometown flavor. I love that. Just the idea. Like I would be like 312. All right, Chi-Town, let's get out there. I don't know what you do. It's kind of like I just spotted a guy on the Chiefs with the last name Spain, and I was like, I'm all in. I know nothing about this guy, Bentley Spain or Brantley Spain, but I'm all in.
Are we going to be rivals this year? Are you going to be a Chiefs fan
No, I'm
too?
sticking with the Bears.
That's a good call.
Unfortunately. Right. Residents of a small Southland community say they will actively, this is in New Zealand, actively petition against any bid to ban domestic cats from the area. A new Southland regional pest management plan proposed by Environment Southland outlines plans to make the Southland town of Omaui cat-free by banning new domestic cats in the area and neutering all existing ones. So would you like to live in a cat-free town?
Oh, I am running to the table to
swipe up.
What?
Super like.
And I have 2 cats, all right?
Whoa.
I have 4 dogs
Wow.
and 2 cats. And cats actually
Hope they're not
generally,
listening.
the cats generally like me. My 2 cats don't. And in fact, one of the cats, Jody, a couple years ago, she was sharpening her claws, and I had like a little roll of paper or something. I tossed it. And I was like, Jody, stop. So she looks at me. She jumps up on the piano bench at the house, and I'm the only person that ever plays that piano. She looks at me again and then goes, bleh, all over the bench. Just yaks everywhere, sits next to it, and stares at me. I decided in that moment, cats are smarter than I realized, and they're more vindictive than I realized, and I can never defeat them. So,
Well, scientists say if cats were bigger, they would eat you and kill you.
See?
They only stick around because
you're only
they're too
making
small.
my point, Sarah.
Yeah.
I'm out.
I'm going to have 2.
Swipe left.
My sister has 2 cats. We've never been a cat family. I made fun of her, but I feel bad because she can't get another dog right away and her dog passed away. So I feel like if you can't have a dog for any reason and you want a pet, a cat is a decent substitute, assuming it's not crazy.
But you don't have to scoop litter for a dog either. Like that's like
It's true. I hate litter boxes.
I'm done on
You know
litter.
what's interesting about New Zealand? There's almost no native animals, which is why they're trying to do this, because introducing cats and other things have hurt the few native populations. Whereas Australia has more animals than like anything. So if you remember Pangea, isn't it fascinating to think about? They were right next to each other and somehow one ended up with all the stuff and the other one has almost none.
Well,
isn't that fascinating?
You lost me at Australia because all I could think about was how jacked kangaroos look.
Did I keep you at Pangea?
Yes, kangaroos though. Kangaroos are scary. I mean, you think cats are scary? Kangaroos, I had no idea. They're like little Arnold Schwarzenegger.
They really are. We got more Tinder to do later in the show.
Golic and Wingo.
Let's not expect too much. There's only one person out there that's expecting way too much out of this guy too early. We know who that is. It's his father.
Remember when you couldn't order a ride at the press of a button? Or get online without hearing this? Or get Domino's delivered to over 150,000 unexpected outdoor locations? Wait, what? Introducing Domino's Hotspots. You can finally get pizza delivered right to the beach, the quad, or the dog park. Not at home? Not a problem. Find a Domino's hotspot near you and get 2 medium 2-topping pizzas delivered for $5.99 each. 2-item minimum. Handmade pan pizzas will be extra asked for this limited time offer. Prices, participation, delivery area, and charges may vary. Restrictions apply. Visit Domino's.com for details on Domino's hotspots.
Michigan, Notre Dame, obviously the big game this weekend to many people. But before we get there, I know we're going to get there.
All of us will get there except for you. You're not going.
I know. I'm the only person.
Trevor's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Golic's going to be there.
Thank you for the reminder. I'll be here working on my new show. I don't know if you've heard about it.
The College Football Show, live on Twitter?
Yeah, on Twitter. That's right. From 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern.
Gratuitous self-promotion.
7 to 8 p.m. Eastern on Twitter.
Well, that makes you the future.
Yes,
see?
he is.
Trevor, I am a little bit stunned that Auburn-Washington just suddenly is falling under the radar. It's a spectacular game with massive playoff implications. So how do you see that game playing out?
I think that'll be a slugfest. I think it'll be low scoring. And I think that all the pressure is on Washington. Auburn has the ability to make up for a loss to Washington because of the nature of the rest of their conference schedule. Washington is carrying the load for the Pac-12. They only won one bowl game last year. They are seen nationally right now as a conference that's down. The conference championship game last year featured 2 teams with 2 or more losses, and everybody knew going into it that the winner of that game would have no shot at the playoff. So the Pac-12 is kind of under the radar now. And I think that Washington needs to come out and get into the belly of the beast in Atlanta, playing a blue blood contender for the SEC championship and show that the Pac-12 belongs. And if they do, then, hey, everybody will look at them and say, hey, the Pac-12's back. If at least the top of the Pac-12's back. If they don't, big problem for the Pac-12 because for the rest of the season, no one out here will pay a whole lot of attention, I think, to what they're doing to each other out there. So this is a huge game for the conference.
Fitz already mentioned the other biggest game of the weekend in that Notre Dame-Michigan. 2 coaches that a lot of people are already talking about hot seats, and the season hasn't even begun yet.
Hot seats.
What do you make of that matchup and those 2 programs?
You know, they're both on the rise, strangely enough. Michigan had a struggle last year. People are saying that Jim Harbaugh has got to put up or shut up now. And that's fair. But I think people forget that games get played. And they look at the 1-5 record against Michigan State and Ohio State. But a couple of those games ended on either controversial plays or a fluky play. Michigan State, a couple of years ago, all Michigan had to do at the end was catch a punt snap and put a foot on the ball, and they win the game. Instead,
snap gets muffed. There's a huge scramble for the ball. It ends up in the end zone for Michigan State in the game-winning touchdown. That's an all-timer of a fluky thing. Then you got the Ohio State game a couple of years ago where Michigan led in overtime. It was 4th and 1. J.T. Barrett of Ohio State gets 1 yard. Michigan is convinced that he was short. The officials on replay said they couldn't tell, so they stayed with the call on the field, which was first down, and then they went on to win the game. Had that been 4th down short, then Michigan wins the game right there on that play. And how different will we be looking at Michigan then? Those are 2 plays that were just a hair. Now, you have to win it, but that doesn't discount all the other good things that Michigan did to get to that point. Harbaugh should not be on the hot seat.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Trevor, so much of the conversation about Michigan in general has been about quarterback play over the last couple of years. Shea Patterson comes in.
Patterson?
Shea Patterson comes in with some heavy expectations. I mean, realistically, he had heavy expectations in the SEC. He now has heavy expectations at Michigan. What's realistic in your mind for Shea?
Realistic is he takes to this pocket pro-style offense, and they bring in some of his mobility because he can run around. His reputation at Ole Miss was that he was a crazy run-around, create, on-the-move kind of guy, and he can do that. But when you go back and watch his throws, there were so many times when he stayed in the pocket in Michigan State and stepped into a terrific pro-style throw. And I think he's got the natural skills to fit really well into what he's being asked to do. I think this will be the first quarterback under Jim Harbaugh that Michigan fans can look at and say, yeah, we can win a championship with this guy.
Talking to Trevor Matich, you can follow him on Twitter at @TMatich. It's Golic and Wingo, Spain and Fitz filling in. You skipped over the Notre Dame part and the Brian Kelly part. Expectations there?
Yeah, high expectation. I have them in the playoff.
Wow.
I think Notre Dame's going to be really good. Now, it'll come down to one thing, and that's the quarterback, Brandon Wimbush. Last year, Brandon Wimbush lost his mind. He lost so much confidence as a passer that he couldn't make the easy slants and the bubble screens at the end of the year. He would throw a bubble screen to a receiver behind the line without a defender there and have it be in the dirt at his feet. That's a mental thing. But by all accounts, he's really improved on a lot of those things during this offseason. And if he can throw to the level of his physical capability, we know he's a great runner, then I think Notre Dame is absolutely a playoff contender.
Do you feel like when you say playoff contender, it's because their play will warrant it at the end of the year? They'll be a top 4 team?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
there's at least the perception that if Notre Dame wins games, that there's enough love for Notre Dame. Somehow they always find their way in. I'm not saying that's accurate, but it at least begs the question.
Yeah, I don't buy that with the committee. People say that because Alabama and Clemson, they all keep getting in all the time, the committee is looking at the big schools and they're giving them the benefit of the doubt. I don't believe that for a minute. I think the committee would be happy to put UCF in last year when they went undefeated if they thought UCF deserved to be in the playoff. And so I don't believe that the committee goes after the blue bloods like that. Notre Dame, I think, has been down long enough that what they did in the past is lost to the memory of the kids they're recruiting. Their parents remember it. But the kids, Notre Dame's that team that wins 8 or 9 games, right? And they know there's some tradition there. So now they've got to compete in recruiting on more of an even footing. But Kelly's doing that. And they've got really good players on both sides of the ball. Talk about the offensive line. Last draft, they had 2 guys taken like in the top, 10 or 12 on the offensive line? And this offensive line will be almost as good. So they're really reloading there. So I have Notre Dame beating Michigan in this game.
Jason Fitz, Sarah Spain in for Trey and Mike, and we're joined by College Game Day on ESPN Radio's Trevor Matich. By the way, you're going to be in South Bend tomorrow for College Game Day on ESPN Radio. Don't miss it. A lot of new breaking news obviously continues to come out, or at least more information continues to come out on the Ohio State investigation. And that's something that you've been on Twitter. You've had strong statements about. It's been interesting and commendable to watch you come out and talk about some of your life experiences and personal experiences as you analyze this. More information has come out, and I just wonder if you have continual thoughts on the way this is unfolding.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things here. One is that the committee's report, the 23-page report, if you read that carefully, and if you also look at their summary of investigative findings from that report, what you see is some things that are really strongly critical of Urban Meyer. I mean, they hammer Urban Meyer on certain things. Other things, though, are supportive of Urban Meyer. The things that are supportive tend to be things that are contractual, red line, fire you kind of things. And the things that are critical tend to be things that are discretionary. So it seems like they disagree with how he used his discretion as a coach to keep the assistant, Zach Smith, around longer than he should have. but from a standpoint of violating contract, according to the report itself, not my opinion, the report itself, he didn't do that. And so,
well, he did, but it was that he did not properly report in written and to the right people. He did report, but not the way he was contractually obligated to.
And that is true. And the report says that. But here's what the report says. If you look at the summary of investigative findings in Section 6, it says that he did fail in his obligation to report upstairs the allegations of domestic abuse by his assistant coach, Zach Smith. But they said he did it in good faith because he didn't understand the triggering mechanism by the information required for him to then have to go upstairs with it. He thought that there had to be legal action, an arrest or a charge in order to trigger that. And what they then found was that a lot of the witnesses that they spoke to in the course of the investigation had the same misconception. And they said right there in Section 6 that Ohio State University needed to do a better job of training their people so that they understood the trigger. So they said, yes, he was in violation of that. But other than misunderstanding what the trigger was, they said that he didn't violate his contract in any way. That's their report, not my opinion. It's what they said.
Well, I think it's worth noting, though, that that's an important distinction, is understanding the requirements as a reporter. And that's something that you spent a significant amount of time as an official reporter at your school being told the scope of. So it's kind of a cop-out to say he didn't understand it. Also that he was influenced by his decision that he didn't believe her. And that's the most troubling thing for me as we look across multiple schools that are struggling with the protection or enabling of people who should have been found out earlier and stopped earlier, whether that's Michigan State or Baylor or Ohio State, is the idea that it is not up to the coach to decide whether he thinks something is a true story or it actually happened. When that allegation occurs, he's required as a reporter to then take that information to the correct places and do it in the way that's outlined in his contract. I understand what you're saying, that it wasn't just a blatant cover-up, but I do think it's meaningful that his comments about 2015 were to say, I didn't even remember hearing about that until someone reminded me, which tells you how very little he thought of it as far as being important and part of his job. When you're working at a university or working at a school with kids, that needs to be something you prioritize.
And Sarah, things like that, the report is very critical against Urban Meyer about. I look at this going forward as to what it will do for future coaches, because coaches do have a mindset that if they can find a reason to keep a player, or in this case an assistant, in the program, they'll try to do that because there's a structure, there's mentoring, there's accountability, there's training. And some players certainly, if they sever that player from the team, will go back to an environment in their home life where they have far less of a chance to develop into the kind of young man that they want to be. Sometimes you have to separate them. But I think now the benefit of the doubt for players and assistant coaches will be largely erased. That if you have one strike on certain things, even if it's not cross a red line. So I'm lifting out of right now the Ohio State thing. Obviously, the concept of putting hands on a woman in anger is a red line. Mm-hmm. If we lift ourselves away from the specifics and the people in that case, and we talk just coaches in general, if somebody doesn't cross a red line, I think coaches will be less likely to give them a second chance if that person, if they fail in trying to rehabilitate from that second chance within the program, will paint the coach in a negative light. So I think a lot of people are going to get cut loose before they might not have.
Well, this becomes news again because former Ohio State trustee Jeffrey Wadsworth told the New York Times that the board's punishment for Buckeyes football coach Urban Meyer didn't go far enough, and that decision prompted him to resign from his post. So it says he told the newspaper he was, quote, the lone voice advocating for a stronger punishment for Myers, who received the 3-game suspension. We're under the gun here, but I do want to ask you, on First Take the other day, we asked Paul Feinbaum what happens to Urban Meyer long term. His answer was at the end of the year, he thinks Urban Meyer leaves Ohio State. Do you think next year at this time, Urban Meyer is the coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes?
I think he will be there. I think the public outcry should not determine whether he is still there. I think that it's important for him to do what he thinks right and Ohio State to do what they think's right. But I will say this, that I don't think Ohio State suspended him instead of fired him because they want to win football games. I think we saw with Penn State the concept that if you are painted with an ugly brush, it's not worth keeping a football coach around.
This has been the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast. You can listen or subscribe on the ESPN app, Apple Podcasts, or just ask your smart speaker to play Golic and Wingo. Plus, you can check the guys out live weekday mornings from 6 to 10 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on ESPN News.
Remember when you couldn't order a ride at the press of a button? Or get online without hearing this? Or get Domino's delivered to over 150,000 unexpected outdoor locations? Wait, what? Introducing Domino's Hotspots. You can finally get pizza delivered right to the beach, the quad, or the dog park. Not at home? Not a problem. Find a Domino's hotspot near you and get 2 medium 2-topping pizzas delivered for $5.99 each. 2-item minimum. Handmade pan pizzas will be extra asked for this limited time offer. Prices, participation, delivery area, and charges may vary. Restrictions apply. Visit Domino's.com for details on Domino's hotspots.